1,000 years back, the ancient Lyrians were going through a period of almost 500 years of continuous war, where the people were battling out all the time for their freedom because of the great cruelty of all of these, leaders, these kings of wisdoms that dominated their worlds and controlled everything. So what happened was, during one of their very violent wars, one of the leaders named Aesel decided to split with a lot of their people. And what happened was, Aesel leaves. He takes 183 of their great spacer vehicles, these very large craft, and there's 250 smaller explorer ships and about 360,000 people. They leave Lyra during the war and go off into space looking for their own place to settle. Well, what happens is they travel for some period of time out in space trying to find some place to land and put all these people. They find this small planet, and they land there and they start building their colony again. Eventually, they populate a couple of more planets in that system, and they're living on 3 planets now in that system. What happens is eventually their civilization is growing to new heights again, and they begin exploring other worlds. They detect... By the way, Aesel has a daughter named Pleja, P-L-E-J-A, and after Aesel had passed on, she became the leader of their society, and hence the name we're calling it the Pleiades. It's a hand-me-down in folklore from that name. But her name was Pleja. Pleja orders the ships to go out and start exploring again, because their society now is rising up to great strength, and it's time to go out and look for new adventure. So she sends the ships out. The ships come in contact again with the destroyer comet, see it, and in the debris of the destroyer comet find some remnants of one of their old home planets, Lyra, and they're following it. And what happens, but they come into the system where Earth is, and they discover Earth. Now, these people had never lived on Earth, but they found that some of their ancestors had. They found traces of old Lyrians who had lived here a long time before. Earth became like a new colony for them, for these people. We're 230,000 years back approximately. Well, they colonized Earth on several occasions, but unfortunately the colonizations did not work out. Almost in every case, wars broke out among the different leaders on Earth where they would be fighting, and so they would come from the home planets to calm it down and stop the wars, or in some cases they would just take everybody off of Earth. There was a long period of time for several thousand years when Earth was considered something like a prison colony. They would deport people from the Pleiades and send them here as kind of like an outpost or something, when they would be stuck here with no technology. Well, on one particular occasion, a very large culture was built up here. There was a raging war going on in the Pleiades. It's about 50,000 years back from now. 70,000 people flee the Pleiades, and they've got a leader named Plejaren, and he's one of these kings of wisdoms. Okay, he comes to Earth with all of these people, and a great culture is started here. This culture lasts for almost 10,000 years, and when it does, Plejaren is revered as a god. And this was the beginning, the Pleiadians say, in our own folklore, where the concept of God really kicked in and got started on Earth. That there were developing Earth people here on Earth at the time Plejaren was here. Now, Plejaren was a very developed being. Apparently he had all sorts of powers. His knowledge of the natural elements of the universe and of nature were well known to him, where things like levitation, telepathy, and so forth were very common. And the then developing Earth human beings, by the way, he was very large. I understand he was 8 to 10 meters tall. So the developing Earth human beings referred to him as the God. And that's how the concept of God got started here on planet Earth from Plejaren's reign. Plejaren lived to be about 4,000 years old. His society lasted for about 5,000 years after his death. And then finally, it fell into war, and most of those people left, and Earth was vacant for quite a bit of time after that. So that brings us up to about 40,000 years back in our history. At this point, Semjase stops this particular contact, and Billy's just kind of sitting there dazed with all of this. And she remarks to him that there's a lot more to this story, and that she'll continue with the history lesson a little bit farther on, in which she does periodically. Throughout the contact, she's always adding on little different elements of our history. But it's interesting to note that we have common ancestry with the Pleiadians. They're from the Lyra section of the sky. and that they were very warlike. It seems like we're following the same patterns of things that we're doing, that they were doing. We're developing up our technology. We fight among ourselves. We never unify, and we use our knowledge against one another instead of for the betterment of mankind. And that the Lyrians and the ancient Plejadians went through tens of thousands of years of wars and destruction on their own. The Plejadians now are peaceful. During the reign of Pelagon, when that war finally ended, that was their last war. They seem to have finally come to the realization that wisdom is a better method than fighting and killing, and they have not had a war since then, and the Plejadians have developed as a very peaceful, happy race since then. Okay. Billy's seventh contact was on February 25th in 75, so he's having several contacts here pretty close together, sometimes within the following day, but so far at least within the week. By the way, he would shoot pictures on some occasions and send the rolls of film into Zurich, and traditionally he would usually take 2 or 3 rolls of film and just get maybe one back. They started disappearing already early on. At this point, though, Billy hadn't really publicized what he was doing, and not a lot of people really knew about it. There was a group of people around him, but he wasn't really opening up his doors to the public yet. When they were on this 7th contact in February 25th, they were discussing other UFO contactees. Billy was concerned that other people around the world were talking about having contacts with ETs, and he was wondering if this was really so. And he brought up the subject of Uri Geller, and wanted to know if he was really a contactee. Apparently Uri Geller was saying that he was having contacts with extraterrestrials, but Semyasi informed him that he was not having any contacts with extraterrestrials. He had not had any ride in the beam ships, but the mental abilities of Uri Geller, he says, were in some ways rather authentic, because he did have a certain amount of mental abilities, but the abilities weren't exactly what he thought they were. If you've ever seen a Uri Geller demonstration, he would bend spoons, and that's what he was doing, at least at that time, and he was attributing that to his great mental powers. And Semyasi informed Billy that what Uri Geller was actually doing is that he was somehow connecting with the spirit of the people in the audience, and he was using their spiritual abilities without them even knowing it. So he was somewhat, I guess, like a catalyst or a conductor somehow, that he would cause that to happen, and he wasn't even aware of it himself. There was a list made of different UFO contactees, like George Adamski. They told him that he was a fraud, that he was making it up. There was a few others, too. They mentioned that Daniel Fry was for real, but I don't think I want to go into that any farther here. It was an interesting thing to note that when Billy would ask these questions, she would usually ask him, "What do you think?" And he would usually comment and state his opinion on it. And it was interesting to note in the notes that they're always flattering him for being right, for being so much more intelligent than they expected. And it was kind of a common thing. You see it going all the way through the notes, where he's always getting flattered and kind of getting his ego buttered up, which was, frankly, to me, kind of a surprise that someone that developed would do that. Either they've really been dealing with some very lowly evolved people, or I'm not sure. Anyway, the next question was about the different color races here on our planet. And Billy wanted to know, he says, we obviously have 5. We have yellow, white, brown, black, and the red race, the Indians. And I wanted to know, if that was common throughout. And she says, yes, it is very common, that depending on the sun system that you live in, that would determine the color. And throughout the galaxy and all throughout the universe, there were many different colors. There was even a blue skin race that lived here on Earth. And Billy said he was aware of that he had actually seen some of the blue skin race when he was in India. And she was surprised to know that. She didn't know that he was aware of that. It seems that the ancient forefathers of the Plejadians, who were the Lyrians, they had dominated many different planets, as we heard a little bit about earlier in the history, and they had seeded many worlds all over our end of the galaxy.